Now I'd like to introduce my dear friend Cam with Genix. He is going to be introducing Minister Neudorf and Honourable Sonia Savage. Minister Neudorf will make a presentation right after, and then they'll have their fireside chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. That is a very tough act to follow. Good steak is hard to follow. Genix is proud to be a sponsor tonight of the AEG event. Genix is a wood preservation and wood fire preservation company located, as has been mentioned, in Atchison, Alberta. I'm excited to be here tonight as their public affairs, and I'm excited to introduce our CEO and owner of Genix, Wes Wall. It is Genix's responsibility and manufacturing responsibility to help preserve, especially in the utility industry, wood products and to preserve them from fires that rage through our lands. And so if you'd like to learn more about our products, please talk to us afterwards or go to our website. And I think you'll find it very intriguing as to what we do. It's also my privilege tonight to be able to introduce our guests. I've had the privilege of knowing them for about 40 minutes, and it's an honor, although I've seen them all over the place, as we all have, in the news and those kinds of things. But it is a privilege. And so prior to his election, Mr. Neudorf worked in commercial construction. He has a civil and structural engineering diploma and is a Red Seal journeyman carpenter, as well as a Gold Seal project manager. An active community volunteer and leader, Mr. Neudorf served as the past president of the Lethbridge Construction Association and is on the board of directors for the Alberta Construction Association, the Alberta Construction Safety Association, and the Workmen's Compensation Board. Mr. Neudorf, his wife Deanne, and their 5 children live in Lethbridge. In his spare time, he enjoys running with his wife and their pet beagle and enjoys spending time outdoors. Maybe he'll tell us a little about the beagle. Nathan Neudorf was sworn in as Minister of Affordability and Utilities and Vice Chair of the Treasury Board on June 9th, 2023. He previously served as the Deputy Minister, Premier, and Minister of Infrastructure. And we look forward from hearing him this evening. Then after his presentation, Minister Neudorf and our guest, the Honourable Sonia Savage, will join in our fireside chat. Sonia Savage is the Senior Counsel at Borden Ladner Gervais. She also sits on the Board of Directors for E3 Lithium Limited and Reconciliation Energy Transition, Inc., as well as Navigator's expert panel on the purpose of the corporation. Prior to returning to her legal profession, she served as a senior minister in the Alberta government, as Minister of Energy, Minister of the Environment and Protected Areas, and Minister of Justice and the Solicitor General. Prior to being elected, the Honourable Savage was a leading advocate in the energy industry. A lifelong Albertan, Honourable Savage started her career practicing law before working for 13 years in the pipeline industry at Enbridge and the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. She earned a Master of Laws in Environment and Energy in 2015 with a published thesis on the evolving role on the National Energy Board. As Minister of Energy, she led the ministry during the global pandemic and price collapse, representing the province at OPEC meetings across North America and in Europe. She implemented a liability management framework to help accelerate remediation of oil and gas wells, and overhauled the Alberta Energy Regulator and modernized Alberta's legal, policy, and fiscal frameworks in new and emerging growth areas such as geothermal, hydrogen, energy storage, and small modular reactors. In 2022, she developed the province's framework to advance carbon capture utilization and storage through CCUS hubs, allocating pore spaces to 25 projects across the province in 2022. As Minister of the Environment and Protected Areas, she's developed Alberta's net zero climate strategy, the emissions reduction and energy development plan in 2023. She retired from politics in 2023 and returned to the private practice where she continues to provide strategic advice on energy transition opportunities across Canada. Please welcome, if you would, Minister Neudorf.
Well, thank you very much, Cam, for that kind introduction. Ashley reminded me not to go after my honorable colleague again. She accomplished a lot in a few short years, and we definitely miss the terrific work and leadership that she brought to our team. She's always been a trusted member, and we're very, very proud. I'm very, very proud to have worked with her for those 4 years. We developed quite a friendship, and as you heard from her resume, she accomplished a tremendous amount in a short period of time. Thank you also to Catherine and Kelly for your remarks and your invitation to be here tonight. I hope to share with you a little bit. I do have a formal speech, but I have opted to set that aside and just share a little bit more candidly with you and hopefully answer some questions. To begin, I do like running with my wife and my dog, our beagle Romeo. He is a standard beagle and howls at everything. And the only thing that seems to shut him up for a while is take him out for a long run. So, excuse me, on Saturday we did 18 kilometers, and he was quiet for the rest of the day, which was very good. And then I have no relation to Danielle, who spoke very well earlier. She should be very proud of her representation. My only similarity is I too worked for Ruth's Chris in a different manner when I was in construction. We did all the millwork in the Edmonton location. Took us about 4 months. We did all the crown molding, 30 feet up in the air in their main dining room, if you've ever been there. We did a lot of work in their vaults and their woodworking, and very proud to have undertaken that project for that period of time, and that it's still there and serving the community of Edmonton. And they do have phenomenal steaks. So I would highly recommend you take the time if you haven't yet. So for more formal remarks, thank you to Cam, who mentioned it. On June 9th, 2023, I was sworn into the Ministry of Affordability and Utilities, and just doing some basic math, that's not even quite 10 months yet that I've been in the role. And it has been an extremely challenging. To be perfectly honest, when the Premier first sat me down, I was Deputy Premier and Minister of Infrastructure, which I know well from my background in construction. And she proposed this ministry as something to go to, and I was not quite sure what it meant. I still ask. Nobody really knows what the Ministry of Affordability is, because nothing's affordable these days, seems like. And it's not very easy to fix, let me tell you that. And the Ministry of Utilities, which is electricity, natural gas, water, hydrogen, potentially heat for geothermal, is incredibly complex. There are many, many parts and pieces, and it's not like I can go to other colleagues around the country and ask for their help, because Alberta is the only one with an energy-only market and a private entity. Everyone else is owned by a crown corporation with government oversight to the entire process. So a very, very different beast. Now, one thing I have learned is Albertans are very proud of their market, very proud of having a private competitive market, and we will do everything we can to ensure that we retain that. Albertans are also very proud of where they're from. It doesn't matter if you're from our biggest city here in Calgary or the smallest hamlet in Zama. People are proud of where they live and what they do, and want to make sure that they can get ahead for not just themselves, but the next generation and the generations after that. To do that, we do face a significant challenge in affordability, and where we have decided to take our first focus in this ministry since being sworn in is on the electricity side of it. Recognizing that electricity costs and utility costs now rival many people's rent and mortgage, whether it's a business or at home. And that twin challenge is putting some very difficult choices in front of many, many Albertans. And we need to address that as radically, as thoughtfully, and as carefully as possible. So if you don't mind, and you indulge me a little bit, I'd like to give you a little bit of context with what I faced when we came into even though the Honorable Sonia Savage did a tremendous amount of work in this, when she left, we were just really starting to see some of the impacts of radical change in our electricity system over the past few years. Under the previous NDP government, they made a decision to move off coal and pursue other avenues for electricity generation to limit our carbon footprint. So I will leave that there, and I think that their goal was admirable, even though some of the pathways might have been different than what I would have suggested or chosen, but I wasn't in government at the time. And from that point on, we saw a tremendous growth of renewables within the province of Alberta for two reasons. One is that being an open market, as we have here, they can actually apply and build in Alberta. And while we were criticized for putting a pause on renewables, I'd like to remind those that every other province has a permanent pause on renewables, because you can't build in any other province unless the government specifically opens a project for you to bid on. And that's often not shared widely, but it is the truth. And when we saw this immediate growth and tidal wave, the expectations previously put out in 2021 by the Alberta Electric Systems Operator, the ISO, they had a 20-year long-term outlook. They expected maybe 1,000 megawatts of renewables to come on the grid by 2041, in 20 years. We eclipsed that 1,000 megawatts in year one. And now we sit of more than 6,000 megawatts within our grid, which is tremendous, and it's amazing. To give you a little bit of context on what that number means is our peak load, so when we were turning on all the lights and all the heat and everything we can, like we were in January the 13th of this year, we're consuming less than 13,000 megawatts. So in maybe 5 short years or less, to have 6,000 megawatts of renewables and more being built all the time, that's an incredible change for Alberta. On top of that, we have approximately 6,000 megawatts of natural gas or dispatchable generation. And we have 6,000 megawatts of cogen. And cogen is our large industrial up in the north doing oil and gas. They often generate electricity as well and contribute their surplus into the grid. So we have rough building blocks of about 6,000 megawatts of generation, more coming online. Today, I would say, even though 6 and 6 is 18, I can do math once in a while, we can generate over 20,000 megawatts at our peak capacity. And with the generation that's coming on this year, we will be close to 28,000 megawatts by the end of the year. So when we came on board and we started to see all of these transitions and the challenges within our marketplace, the question that began to occur to me is, what do we do with all the extra generation when we have it, when we're generating double what we actually consume? The answer at the time was, well, you curtail it and you just don't allow it onto the grid. And I went, as a market-inspired and a business-friendly jurisdiction like Alberta to quote-unquote waste that electricity, that doesn't seem to be serving Albertans well. When you add that to the fact that we are now seeing an increase in volatility, and I'll explain that a little bit in a moment, and to get to last August, where within 3 months of being sworn in, we had the highest electricity prices in Alberta's history, and to be the Minister of Affordability, well, it was not popular at many establishments across the province. Or once I was introduced, they said, well, you're doing a terrible job because nothing's affordable. We had to act very quickly. And the previous year, in 2023, we had provided affordability payments, a cap and deferral for electricity cost, a short-term but effective solution to help people manage that. My question at the time was, what happens next summer when costs go up? I'm sure that won't happen. Costs are traditionally low in the summer. Then last August happened. This year, we had the opportunity. We could have proceeded with other affordability measures, again, cap and deferral, but under the leadership of our Premier, Danielle Smith, and our cabinet, we made the difficult but needed decision to address the root issues of our market and our structure to actually solve this problem. Otherwise, we would be continuing to put money forward to support people in an unsustainable way. And in fact, even with our cost demands that we're facing now, on a $73 billion budget, our surplus is only $367 million, which wouldn't take a lot to burn through. I'm sure all of you are well aware of how thin a line that truly is. So as we looked at the influences, and I'll share a little bit about the market volatility and how I believe that came to be predominant within our market structure, is renewables come on board and they bid into the market at $0 a megawatt. That's typically how they bid, because they are low cost. But that's not what they're paid. Our market structure is built in blocks of your price by your units generated, and they stack up from lowest to highest. And then there's a clearinghouse price that everybody gets paid at that clearinghouse. No matter what you bid, if you bid higher, you still get paid that. If you bid lower, you still get paid that. But the order of purchase is from the lowest cost up until the highest cost. And so therefore, it was very good for renewables. They were purchased first because they were always the lowest bid. But our thermal generators and dispatchable generators were now in a position where instead of operating and selling 10,000 megawatts over whatever time period, they were only operating for however many hours. They were only operating for a fraction of those hours. And as any good business person would do, is they have to still make the profit to pay for their capital investment and return on investment to their shareholders. They said we have to make the same amount of profit over a fraction of the hours that we used to generate. And we began to see an increase in volatility of pricing, frequency, and magnitude. And that practice is known as economic withholding. And it was part of our market structure. It was intended to be so that scarcity or the lack of generation and high prices would go together and attract more development and building of generation to come online. That's how it was meant to be. But we were having the opposite problem. Because of the market structure, the volatility going on, and the uncertainty, we weren't seeing natural gas generators coming online. And yet we're seeing more and more of renewables. So again, renewables are not the enemy. They are a much needed part of our mix, and they're a much needed part of our getting to a carbon neutral future. But they have unique characteristics that we do have to manage to make sure that we have a balanced and reliable system. And the market structures that we are working towards, we believe will set a new priority and place a value on reliability so that we have a much more stable marketplace. We are already seeing that. And in fact, we were made aware of one independent review of our market structure and our new policies on economic withholding. And it was projected by this study that we potentially had an 8% reduction to the price of electricity over the next few years, and could result in something like $400 million of savings over that same time frame. So we believe we're on the right direction. We believe that reliability does have a value for Albertans. Again, we saw that in significant effect on January the 13th. And what else we saw on January 13th is that when we asked Albertans to help, they helped. And if you haven't heard this stat before, in 1 minute, we saw 100 megawatts of load come offline. And that's the equivalent of roughly 120,000 houses in 1 minute. And actually, the number is likely to be much higher than that because people didn't turn off everything of the electricity at the time. They turned off lights typically, which is wonderful. But they might have dishwasher or washing machines going. They probably still had furnaces and heaters going. So if even conservatively they turned off half, that means 240,000 houses did something in the first minute of that alert. A further 100 megawatts came off in the next 3 minutes. So we had 200 megawatts come offline in 5 minutes. And I would guess that this is a low number. That means 500,000 households in Alberta did something within 5 minutes of that alert. I have never been more proud to be Albertan. I was very emotional looking out my front window and seeing an absolutely dark subdivision. Not typically what we like to see. We like to see lit up, bright and friendly. But it was very emotional and very powerful. And I think it speaks to the strength of Albertans and the Alberta spirit where when called upon, they will answer need. And that leads me into where I believe there's tremendous opportunity for the future of Alberta, and that's on demand-side management. We have not had a system that rewards ratepayers and consumers of electricity for their good choices. I've knocked on many doors the last 2 elections, talked to many seniors in particular who tell me of, in the winter, turning their heat down to 15 degrees Celsius, the very lowest they can without freezing pipes, wearing 2 or 3 sweaters, and it hardly makes a difference on their bill. We need to empower individuals like that who are making good choices to not use electricity during peak load and reward them for it financially, because I think that's the responsible thing to do. And that would include time of use rates. That would empower them to make those choices. It would also empower and enable people to put solar panels on the roof. Match that with battery storage at their place of work so that they can maximize their capacity and conserve their consumption. And I think rather than pursuing a consumeristic system where the more electricity that we use means we have to build and build and build and build, and someone's got to pay for that. I think there's a better way forward. And I think Alberta is the best place in Canada, if not the world, to do that, because I know what Albertans can do when asked. So we want to build a system that is reliable, sustainable, and empowers every consumer to make better choices and rewards them for those good choices. That provides them an avenue to conserve their consumption of electricity and make sure that we're not pursuing an endless consumerism, but pursuing prudent steps both in cost, in capital, and in our economy. This all comes down to good planning. And I think what we did 25 years ago was great for Alberta when we deregulated our electricity system. But at the time, I think politicians abdicated from their responsibility. And they said to industry, you come up with solutions and we'll put a regulator in place to say whether those solutions are good or not. And then we're not at fault and nobody can elect us or unelect us from whatever happens with the electricity grid. And by and large, we got along quite well for about 20 years and that was fine. But then the world began to change. And now I believe it's a time for politicians to be accountable, to show Albertans how they're planning, to be transparent, and sometimes even to invest in critical infrastructure. Because if you can show me an Albertan or a Canadian who doesn't need electricity on a daily basis, I don't know where you'll find them. Because we all do, whether we have homes or whether we don't, whether we need healthcare or whether we need send our kids to school, we need electricity. And I don't think anybody disagrees that we will need more electricity in the future as we go forward. There's more and more demands for it all the time. So we have to be prudent and we have to plan well. And I would like to help establish a better planning authority, for lack of a better term, here in Alberta, that brings together key stakeholders in the industry with our regulators and with our government officials so that we can find the best path forward for Albertans that allows for the best technology to be adopted, allows for the best method of investment to be utilized, whether that is through the generator, through the transmitter, through the ratepayer, or through the taxpayer. And I believe that if we do that together, we will find the best, most reliable, most affordable, and lowest carbon path forward. And I believe that with the technology that we already have within Canada, we will get there by 2050, if not sooner. And while we've said that we can get to carbon neutrality by 2050, like everything Albertan does, I'm sure we'll get there sooner. And especially if we get to show up the federal government in Ottawa. But with that, I'm happy to answer some questions and take some time to chat a little bit further, and hopefully that we'll have a great discussion to come. Thank you very much for having me.